Man, my that guys, we might be live right now. I think we're live. I think it's working. Yay! All right. So we never know with Zoom and Facebook if they're going to play well together, but apparently they are, at least for the time being, playing well together. So, folks, my name is Michael Hellickson. I am one of the coaches here at Club Wealth Coaching and Consulting. And we do a lot of these, what we call Club Wealth TV episodes. And, our whole thing here is that we're not pitching anything. We're not trying to sell you on anything. We're just trying to bring a lot of value to people. And so with me today are two of our esteemed coaches. We've got, of course, Mr. Brian Curtis, Coach Brian Curtis, who is the Oracle of Bentonville in Bentonville, Arkansas. So this is a gentleman who consistently closes over 300 transactions a year. So apparently Brian knows a thing or two about real estate, and is like Doug here, has forgotten more about real estate than most of us will ever know. So super glad to have Brian as my co-host yet again. And then, of course, today's guest is Coach Doug Holladay, who's to my left here. And Coach Doug is our wealth creation coach at Club Wealth. And essentially what that means is his role. Well, actually, I want to let him explain that role in just a second. But understand that at Club Wealth, we're all about, it's not just about making money. We're all about you making money. We want you to make money. We really want you to have a lot of success. But in addition to making money, what we really, really want is we want you to keep more of the money you make. We want you to be able to set yourself up for retirement. And that's sometimes easier said than done. But if you follow the practices that Doug's going to teach us today, it can be fairly straightforward. So that being said, Doug, to go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what it means to be the Club Wealth Creation Coach.
Okay. First of all, I want to start out and talk about why I am somewhat qualified to do what I do.
I, by the way, I would say a lot more than somewhat. And that's actually good. I'm glad you're going to mention that. Go ahead.
So, actually, before I left high school, I started my first business. In fact, I love starting businesses. I started to build businesses and sell businesses, and that's kind of what I did till about the age of 35, and I retired. The problem is that retirement and myself didn't look good together. We tried to hang out, and it just wasn't happening. So consequently, one of the things that I did is I found out that I was really, really, really good at trading stocks. And I was making literally millions of dollars in the stock market until I wasn't. And so all the money that I had amassed in my brokerage accounts, I was literally gambling, but I didn't know I was gambling. And in the late 90s, if anybody lived through that, we saw some horrendous downturn in the stock market. In fact, I was watching my portfolio lose, $500,000 a day. It literally took about 3 weeks to wipe me out. Now, a lot of people say, well, why didn't you get out? The problem is that we're all eternal optimists, and I'm probably the worst about being an optimist. I'm optimistic about everything. That was my first failure in life, and it was devastating. But being the optimist that I was, I thought, okay, I can redo this. I can start over. So I built yet another business and also became a licensed real estate agent at the time. My next venture was that besides, still creating a few businesses, I started to amass properties, and I built about a portfolio of about 40 different properties with a combination of commercial and residential. And I was doing at the time really well in real estate, and from the years 2005 to about 2007, I was doing 2008 actually. I was doing about $1.5 million to $1.7 million GCI. And so I was out buying up literally subdivisions. And we bought land, and I need to back up a little bit. We didn't buy land, we purchased it with the help of banks. So I was leveraging my way into all of these properties. Well, by 2011, I was pretty much had gone through my fortune. As a result, my wife and I, everybody that we knew was taking out bankruptcy. And so we went to see our own bankruptcy attorney and sat down with him and really felt good about maybe this is the move that we needed to do so that we could get a fresh start over again. Went home that night, got on knees, prayed about it, felt really good about it, woke up the next morning and said, I can't do that. That's not me. I can't walk away from my problems. So I went to work and I went to the banks and I started negotiating for lower interest rates and whatnot. And I had probably, well, in fact, every bank decided at first that they were going to work with us. And then halfway through what we were doing, I had one bank that took 10 properties back and said, unfortunately, the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing. And the foreclosure process, I lost 10 homes. But it was a real eye-opener for me because I thought to myself, why in the world, could I amass millions of dollars 10 years ago and I lost it? And then here I am again. I had amassed millions of dollars in equities, and it was back down to zero. I could not understand what I was doing wrong. I thought I was disciplined. The problem is that I had my priorities all mixed up. As a result of having my priorities all mixed up, I wasn't focused on wealth creation. I was focused on getting rich. And I learned a number of things during that process. And it's taken I guess about 8 years now to get me back to the point that I was. In fact, I'm actually better off now than I have been in my entire life. And the reason is because I took all of the things that I learned. And how do we learn? We learn by the mistakes that we make. And so I took all of those mistakes and analyzed them and thought, what in the world do I need to do to not only build, but maintain the wealth that I've created? And I think the key word there was that I really was focused on riches in the beginning, where I realized that part of my problem is that I was not focused on wealth. And as a result, I sat down and worked out some things, did a lot of reading, started to return to my core values, and started looking at the things that I had left out. And unfortunately, I had left out a big part of my family. They're a big part of my life, which was my family. I was a terrible father. I was a terrible husband. I was working all the time. I wasn't listening to the people around me who always told me, Dad, why are you doing that? Why are you putting yourself through this? So I realized I needed to make some changes. And so I returned to my core values. One of the books that I'm going to tell you about right now is a book that I think that everybody should read if you haven't. And that is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That's probably the book that can help you return to core values faster than anything. The second book that I sat down and read was, it just flipped right out of my head.
Like I said, Doug's forgotten more about real estate than most of us will ever know.
It's the 4 Laws of Debt-Free Prosperity. That's the book. In fact, the gentleman that wrote it licensed Stephen Covey, who wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, to do his own spin on the book. And so there's another book out there, I think, that's called The 4 Laws of Prosperity, that Stephen R. Covey titled and runs through his program. So either one of those books are really, really good books. And I love that book because it takes a real life scenario of a gentleman through his life and really goes into how to fix the predicament that he was in. So I like that because as the Club Wealth coach, and I'll get into that in just a minute, how that came about. Too often people call me and they're not calling me to say, Doug, I'm ready to create wealth. They're calling me saying, Doug, how do I save my business? And I think that's good. I'd rather have somebody call me and say, Doug, how do I save my business? Rather than, geez, Doug, I wish I'd have talked to you a month ago or 2 months ago or 6 months ago, because I do get some of that as well. And part of that is understanding your business. And I help people do that. I can go through their P&L statement, which is, if anybody doesn't know what a P&L statement is, it's your profit and loss statement. But more importantly, most people don't ever look at their balance sheet. They have no idea where they're at. A P&L statement will show you where you're at any given time, but a balance sheet will reveal to you the trends of where you're going and where you've been. And you really need to pay attention to that and watch that, because that's going to show you, where your cash is going. And basically it's a picture of all of your accounts and the trend line of your accounts. So very, very important to pay attention to both of those reports from your accountant, or if anybody's using Quicken, you can pull off either one of those at any given time.
One of the things, real quick, I'll just type this in here now. If you guys, for those of you that don't have a P&L, there is a website. If you go to www.qbspecial, I'm typing this into, hang on one second, .com. I'm typing this in. It's an app for your phone. It's really cool. Essentially, all you do is you grab your phone, you upload this app, you connect it to your bank account and your credit card statements. And it's $5 a month, right? And if you swipe left for business expense, swipe right for a personal expense, you have an up-to-date P&L all the time. This is really great, especially for people who do not have W-2 employees or only have maybe one W-2 employee. Again, it's inexpensive. It's $5 a month, and you get a profit and loss that's up to date all the time. The sad truth is that most of the agents watching this right now, and I know we've got a ton of people watching right now, most of the people watching this right now probably don't have a profit and loss statement, and you need one. I mean, obviously, I mean, if you don't have a P&L, you don't know really truly what's happening in your business. You might have kind of an idea, but what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to be intimidated by the P&L. It's not as hard as it seems to go through it. Once you get used to it and you kind of, go through it a little bit, you can really go through even a fairly large P&L in about 15 to 20 minutes. You can kind of get through it and really kind of understand what's happening in your business. And it really allows you to identify places where you can save money. And by the way, saving money is a lot more important than making more money, right? So as an example, Doug and I have talked in the past about if I want to go to dinner, right? So based on how much, I love it. Jeff Russell's like, swipe left on every transaction because everything's a business expense. I love it. That's awesome. You're awesome, Jeff. But think about this. If I want to go to dinner, if I want to spend $100 on dinner, based on the profitability of most real estate businesses and taxes and all the other expenses that you have, you essentially need to earn $366 in the typical real estate business to be able to spend $100 on dinner. That's crazy, right? So what's better? Is it better to go out and make a whole bunch more money, or is it better to save money and avoid, for example, tax? Which there's a difference between avoidance and evasion.
Yes,
right?
there is. Yes.
But anyway, that said, it's really, really important that you guys understand your P&L. So Doug, keep going. You're on a roll. You're doing great.
So why am I a Club Wealth coach, and what is a wealth creation coach? I'm here at Club Wealth for two specific reasons. Number one is to help those that are in trouble. It's not my first preference. I'd rather be somebody calling me saying, "Hey, Doug, I'm making a buttload of money and I just need to know what to do with it." That would be my first choice. But we've got to get you to that point, right? And one thing that Club Wealth can do, Club Wealth can absolutely teach you how to go from a single agent to becoming a mega agent, and having that problem of, what do I do with the buttload of money that I'm making? The problem is that very few coaching programs ever teach you how to maintain that money and what to do with it, and how to set yourself up for retirement. If you choose to retire, I have to look at myself and say, hey, will I ever retire again? I found out at the age of 35 that it's just not for me. I can see myself, I may be out of day-to-day production, so to speak. I've turned the business over to Coach Garrett and Coach Dustin, and I'm telling you, they are running with it, and it's awesome, and I love watching their success. But it really does allow me the time to work with Club Wealth members who need a little extra, who need help setting up their future. One of the things that I always say is, let's start with the end in mind. And I have a little exercise I do at the live events. I'm not going to go into it here because it wouldn't have the same effect. But you really need to think about your retirement, or think about your death. What would you want somebody to say about you at your funeral? What kind of a life did you lead? What kind of a legacy are you leaving behind? Mm-hmm. That's where I like to start, because that's when we can start talking about true wealth rather than just riches. The problem with riches, I live next door to a gentleman who makes $5 million a year, but he's miserable. He's worried about what everybody thinks about him. He's worried about the economy. He's worried about taxes. He's worried about, he spreads his money around every bank in the valley. And the reason is because he's trying to save it. He's trying to keep it all insured. And the problem, he just cannot enjoy life because he's worried about who's going to take his money. He's worried about getting sued. Riches are elusive. As I found out, they're hard to hang on to. The tighter you squeeze, the more they go through your fingers. And they're never enough. The problem is that people are seeking riches. Hey, they'll crawl over everybody and everything to make them. And it doesn't matter how many they have. They want more. It's never enough. Yep. It does not bring satisfaction, and absolutely will not bring joy into your life.
It's funny. We talk about, not to cut you off, I want you to keep down this track. I love it. But we talk a lot in Club Wealth about no success in the world can compensate for failure in the home. And I think people hear that, and I think it resonates with a lot of people, but I also think people misunderstand that. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of times I think people think, well, that we're saying that they shouldn't be successful, or that, it's not okay to make a lot of money. And that's not what we're saying here. We're not saying it's not okay to make a lot of money. What we're saying is and correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, but I believe what you're saying is, you've got to have that balance. You've got to understand that there are things that are more important than money. Money is also important. You got to have money to pay your bills. You got to have money to pay the mortgage, buy food, all that kind of stuff. Money is a necessary thing in our world today. And certainly we want to build wealth. We want to get to a point where, like Doug, where we have the opportunity to get out of the rat race, right? What does that really mean? It means, like, for Doug, his passive investments kick off more money each month than his expenses each month. So literally all Doug's got to do, if he wants to make more money next year, he'll just raise rents. right? And he'll make more money next year. Is it that easy for most of us? How many of you watching right now can just say, well, all I got to do is, keep collecting what I'm getting and I don't ever have to work again. And if I want to make more, then I'll just raise rents a little bit. That's not something that most people can say. And what we want to help position you to get there so that with your time, you can spend your time with the things that are more important. Helping other people, spending time with your family, leaving a legacy that's greater than just look at all the money I made, because nobody cares. And frankly, and I know this sounds cliche, but obviously you can't take it with you, but what you can do is you can leave behind a legacy of the people whose lives you impacted are continually impacting the lives of others in positive and lasting ways. And that has perpetuated itself long after you're gone. That's a legacy. Right? Just leaving your kids a little extra money, that's not a legacy.
No. In fact, I used to live, well, I shouldn't say, I'm still living in the same spot. Most of you maybe don't know who John Paul Getty is. John Paul Getty was at one time the wealthiest oil man in the United States. In fact, one of the wealthiest in the world. His great-granddaughter lived right across the street from us. She was a trust fund baby. Her house was trashed. Eventually, they carted her off and her children because of drugs. They literally, he left a legacy for his children and grandchildren that they didn't have to be contributors to society anymore. And that's not a good thing either. And there again, that's what riches do. When we get back to wealth and what true wealth is blessing the lives of others. So wealth is really about what you can do for others. Riches are really about what you can do for yourself. And
I see Brian typing. Are you typing that in the chat right now, Brian? Because I love that one.
No, I do like it. So, Doug, here's the thing that's interesting. You and I have spoken a lot, and, I really appreciate what you bring to the table. Let me say this. Let's break this down to a little bit more simplistic. There are people on this who are listening to this who have anywhere from $1 in the bank to probably millions of dollars in the bank. So, let's start, if you don't mind, just with some of those people who are maybe on that, maybe they're making $100,000 a year. Maybe they're getting to the point where all of a sudden, they started in real estate and they were making 20, 30 grand a year, and all of a sudden they got $100,000. A couple things happened. They didn't realize that, oh, by the way, you got moved into a different tax bracket and all those things are gone. But, what do we say to these people? Where do we start to say, because I'm 100% sure I know the answer. When is the best time to start is yesterday, but that's hard. But so let's at least start today. So, where do we start for somebody like that? If you're on this call and you have no plan to become wealthy, but you'd like to be wealthy, you have no plan for retirement, you have no plan for any of these things, where do you suggest somebody like that start? Is somebody who's gone from 0 to 100 and back down to 0 and back up to 100? And, where do we start? And I think that's an important place for people to look at.
Yeah, so that's important. And I'm getting to that. And I love what you said about a plan. If you do not have a plan, you plan to fail. Period. Everybody has a plan. You're either going to plan out your future, or the future's going to plan to fail you. That's the way it works. So this is where it gets a little bit dicey for some people, all right? Because when I start talking about budgeting, then people's eyes gloss over and they're, oh, I don't want to have to live on a budget. The problem with that is that if you do not live on a budget, you are not planning to create wealth. All you're doing is planning dinner for tonight.
Well, and I'll say this, though. Everyone lives on a budget. It's just that not everybody knows what those numbers are. You're living on a budget whether you want to or not. You're spending X number of dollars, and maybe X goes like this, but you're doing it. The difference between those people who have some success in saving some money and creating some wealth is they actually pay attention to it. So you're on a budget. It just may not be a good one.
Your budget may be a fail right off the bat. So right. You're right.
Yeah, are you designing your budget, or did it design your lifestyle?
Exactly. And that brings up an important point, because like Brian said, what happens is that you will spend every dime that you make. That's our human nature. That's why we have to plan for our future and not let our future plan for us. That's the problem. So typically what I do is I set people up right off the bat with a 30-70 budget. And when I talk about a 30-70 budget, that 30 is what I call sacred funds, and the 70 is what you have to live on. All right. And I always tell people, because believe me, I counsel with people that make millions of dollars a year, and I counsel with people that make $30,000 a year. And I can tell you the people that make $30,000 a year are happier. They don't have all of the problems. They don't have all of the debt, you know. I mean, I have people that will come to me and say, Doug, I got a $5,000 credit card. I think I need to take out bankruptcy. I'm like, no, that's not happening. You know, and yet I work with doctors that make millions of dollars a year, and they're only one paycheck away from bankruptcy. They've got $10,000 house payments. They've got $3,000 car payments, you know, because they haven't planned. Once again, they've learned to live off everything that they make, thinking that they're invincible and that they will be able to continue that up until the time they retire. And then what? Nobody looks at that far ahead. And I always tell people, you know, when you got out of high school or college and decided to start your career, you were living off of ramen noodles and riding a bike. Now, I'm not expecting that everybody or a family of 5 is, you know, sitting down to ramen noodles every night and everybody gets out and heads to work and school on bikes. But there's always a happy medium. So let's get back to this 30-70 budget. 30%, the first 30% of everything you make should go to what I call sacred funds. 10% right off the top goes to charitable contributions. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Because it puts you in a frame of mind that you're going to help others first. And if you always do that, it puts you into a mindset where it brings great joy and happiness into your home. And a lot of people say, well, I can't afford that. Well, maybe you can't right now, but let's get you in a position where you can. The second 10% should go on to pay off debt that is not enabling you to do the first, okay? Once your debt is paid off or paid down, then that 10% goes to your investment fund, okay? The third 10% goes to an emergency fund. Now, when I talk about emergency fund, I'm not talking that, hey, JCPenney's is having a sale. Oh boy, that's an emergency. I've got to buy while it's on sale. That is not an emergency. Your emergencies are things that come up that are life-threatening, that have a magnitude that could be life-changing. And a lot of people say, well, okay, I've built my reserves. Now what do I do with it? That reserves then at that point should go into your investment budget as well. So you're still living on a 30-70 budget, but now you're paying 20% into your investments. Now the 70% goes to everything else. How do you calculate what everything else is? I suggest that you start with a 2-week trial period where you write down everything that you spend. If you stop at Circle K or 7-Eleven and buy a candy bar and a Coke, you need to keep that receipt, and you need to make sure that goes onto the things that you're spending. Because you'd be surprised at how many holes we develop, and people don't realize how much money gets spent in free cash in your pocket. You know, you're going through, you have all of these you walk through a mall and you have all of these sales coming and hitting you, and you think, oh, you know what? Boy, I better get this or better get that. the problem is that that type of spending will destroy your budget and destroy your future faster than anything. You need to plan for that. Then you come back after your 2-week period. I actually like to do a 1-month trial period, but a lot of people can't stay focused that long. So we've cut it down to 2 weeks so that you get a better idea. You need to separate out what your spending habits are versus what your hard costs are. And when I'm talking hard costs, I'm talking about rent or house payment, car payment, medical bills, your utility payments, all of those payments, insurance payments, all those payments that are happening one at a time, or monthly, those go into a separate category than your spending accounts. Those obviously have to be taken care of before your spending needs. And then start, building a budget. You put X number of dollars towards clothing. You put X number of dollars towards gifts. And you save these things in those accounts. And a lot of people will open up separate accounts at the bank so that they can keep track of all of these. Now, in real estate, it becomes so important because everybody knows that you might go 1 or 2 months without without selling something and earning a commission. So a budget becomes ever so much more important because you take everything that you earned from the previous year, and that becomes your income amount. So you build your budget off of what your income is. At the end of the day, once you've put in all of your spending accounts, your household repairs, your food, your clothing, your gifts, your entertainment, those all should be budgets that you spend for. And people say, well, Doug, what about if I want to go on vacation? If you want to budget in a vacation, do so, but budget it in and don't put it on a credit card and pay for it after the fact, because you're going to pay for, if you spend $3,000 on a vacation, you're going to spend $5,000 paying for that vacation if you put it on a credit card and pay it off over time.
I got to tell you, you're bringing up a really hot point for me. We talk and I catch a lot of flack for this. I'm looking for you to defend me a little bit on this, Doug. So, and Brian, I'm hoping you'll go to bat for me in this one too. I don't know. Maybe you will. Maybe you'll totally disagree with me. I don't know. But I always say, if you can't afford to pay cash for it, you shouldn't be driving it, right? And I tell you, a lot of people don't agree with that. A lot of people feel like, oh no, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to buy the car on payments and I'm going to take the money and I'm going to invest it in something else. And the reality is they don't.
They don't do it.
No, they say they will, but they freaking never do.
Yeah.
And the reality is when they, especially let's talk about leases for a minute. You want to talk about a trap. You want to talk about, financial indentured servitude, go get a lease, right? And don't get me wrong. Are there times where a lease could make sense? Maybe. But for the vast majority of watching this, the answer is no, right? And same thing with just buying cars on finance or on credit. Now, that being said, I started in this business because I get a lot of flack from people that say, oh, I need to drive a really nice car for real estate. Got to have a Mercedes, got to have a BMW. And I'm just like, no, you don't. First of all, I started off in real estate. I had a bunch of $500 cars that didn't last me very long, right? They broke pretty frequently, but it got me through until I could afford to pay for a new car in cash, at which point all of a sudden I started actually saving money because I wasn't spending so much money on maintenance and all this other stuff. But I'll tell you guys, when we ran the #1 team in the country, I was literally driving a 1998 Toyota 4Runner with over 200,000 miles on it, and people didn't care. So I don't know. What are your thoughts, Doug?
No, I agree for 90% of the people. That's the way it is. There's going to be a few people that can get away with doing a lease, but I put 35,000 miles a year on my car. Do you know what kind of a lease when you go to turn that car in, you're hammered.
Yep.
I mean, you might as well have bought the car to begin with.
And then some. It's going to cost you more than it would have to buy it in the first place.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. So, and not only that, here's what I feel like is the big trap with this is that people go out and they get this lease, and because it's affordable right now, right? And they're thinking about today dollars. And it's what's interesting. There's a book by Thomas Stanley called The Millionaire Next Door, and one of the best books I feel ever written. And Thomas talks about wealthy people are less first cost sensitive and more long-term cost sensitive. And so I think about that and I think, okay, if I'm really truly long-term cost sensitive, I'm going to be a lot more careful about making sure that instead of getting into this lease that's cheap today, I'm looking at what's my long-term cost for this, what's my overall cost over the life of this car. And I'm really looking for, hey, look, I want to have the lowest cost per mile driven possible in a car that's nice enough for me to at least feel good about what I'm driving, so that I have the confidence I need to do my job. So
with that being said, I have both bought cars for cash, and there are occasionally times when I buy a car and put it on time. The reason is because if I can get an interest rate that is 3% or less, hey, I got no problems with financing a car.
But you also invest a lot of money at a lot higher interest rate. And so for you, it makes sense. But keep going. I'm sorry.
But unless you understand those principles, then it's probably not a good idea until you get to that point.
Here's one of my favorites.
Let me piggyback, because I think that's something that people miss, and it's not that buying a car cash is the only way to do it, because it's not. To your point, I'll be honest, my car is financed at 1.9% interest rate. Why would I do that? I mean, I can't borrow, 10 years from now, am I going to be able to borrow money at 1.9? Probably not. So I'm doing that. It makes sense for me. I do think if you're a real estate agent and you are not, and you're driving so little that you can lease a car, you're doing something wrong, because, how do you drive a car 12,000 miles a year and be a real estate agent? Someone teach me that. I'd love to learn that, because that sounds like a lot more fun than what I've done in the last years. But here's the thing. People listen to the first part of that conversation, and then they forget the second part of the first part of the conversation is, look, I can borrow money at 1.9%. Of course I should do that. And I actually agree with that. The problem is they forgot the second part, where you say, I borrowed this money at 1.9%. Now I can go and invest this money at 7, 8, 9, 12, 15. That's the part that they forget, or they incur other debt, 15, 20, 30% on credit cards. I mean, I run everything in my business through a credit card because I like points. But let me say this, every single month that gets paid off. It's a conduit. And there's a difference between something being a conduit and something being a place, well, I'll just borrow $15,000, $20,000 for 6-7 months. Because to your point, I just paid double what it cost for me to go on vacation, or for me, to eat a burger at McDonald's just cost me $17. Well, that's kind of ridiculous. So anyway, it's a big full picture, and I think that's one of the things that people miss.
Two things on that, Brian. First of all, what's interesting is he talks about McDonald's, right? Yeah. And first of all, it's interesting just to hear Brian talk about McDonald's, because
we know he does not eat at McDonald's.
Don't eat at McDonald's very often. About once every 2 months, just to remember why I don't eat there.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. But what's interesting, Brian, and I think you would agree with this, it's interesting to me that people would be vehemently opposed to and offended by spending $17 on a burger at McDonald's. And yet they have no problem spending, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars extra on their car, simply because it gets them what they want right now, instead of delaying some of that gratification. And so again, I don't want you guys to think that this whole show today is about cars and all this stuff. Really what we're talking about is, it kind of comes back to a phrase that I heard a long time ago. And that is, those that understand interest earn it. Those that don't, pay it. And, we really need to understand the difference. And we need to know that, look, if I'm going to do this, then I have to invest that additional money somewhere else. So if I'm going to go buy a car on a lease or whatever, and I would never do that. Let me back up. If I'm going to buy a car on payments, then I'm going to take the cash I would have spent on the car. First of all, I'm going to make sure I have that cash so that at any point in time I can pay it off. And then I'm going to take that cash and I'm going to invest it in something that gives me a good rate of return on that investment that is far above and beyond the interest rate that I'm paying for that car.
Well, then in a sense, what's happening is you're allowing your investment to pay off that car.
Right. Exactly.
At least partially.
Yeah.
What's that, Brian?
At least partially. I mean, let's face it,
Yeah.
guys, unless you're getting a 30% investment, that's another delusion that people have. I'm making 8% over here, I'm paying 2% over here. That's not covering the cost of that car.
No.
It's offsetting it, and it's a smart way to invest it, but look at the real numbers. And that's another thing that people do. They tell themselves these lies. So it's rational lies. You know, the word rationalize is rational lies. It makes sense. I can rationalize it, but it's still a lie. So, you know, be careful about that. Get with somebody, you know, if this is not your expertise, if you're not nerdy like me and can sit and do the math, I can't spell my own name, but I can do the math. If that's not you, get with somebody like Doug. Get with a financial account. Get with somebody who can say to you, look, you're doing this wrong, do this. Trust those people. Just like, you know, I don't take pictures of the houses that I list. Why? Because I'm a crappy photographer. If you're a crappy financial person, get a good financial person. I think that's one of the things that needs to be said more often than not.
Yeah, I totally agree, Brian. And so, guys, here's the thing. Do me a favor. I'd love for everybody to type in. I'm just curious. What kind of car do you drive? And I'm not asking to criticize anybody or anything like that. I'm just curious. I'm curious what kind of car most real estate agents are driving. I don't think that there's, I mean, I know there's some Mercedes and BMWs out there, but I also think there's a lot of Toyotas and a lot of Chevys and a lot of Fords. And I'm just curious, if you're comfortable sharing it, type into your screen, what kind of car do you drive? I'm just curious about that. So go ahead, Doug.
So you talk about that. Back in 2007, we knew how good the market was because they opened up a Hummer dealership just down the street from our office, and 50% of the real estate agents in the valley all were driving Hummers.
Really?
So, I mean, it was just.
But it's Idaho. I mean, isn't that kind of a thing? Like you have to, if you're going to live in Idaho.
Nobody needs a Hummer.
No?
Nobody needs a Hummer.
Most practical vehicle ever created. The H1 or H2, that it was cool, but it was most impractical vehicle.
Talk about a gas guzzler. And, I mean,
6 miles
you certainly didn't need that to go out and show property in our neighborhood. That's for darn sure.
Okay, I got to know. Has anybody watching ever owned a Hummer? I mean, I always thought they're cool. I never owned one, but I always thought they were really cool, and I always wanted to own one. But that's so funny. I love it. Lenore's like, minivan. I drive what works for my family, not to impress anyone. I love that. That's nice. Awesome. Look at all these cars. We got Hondas, we got Nissans, we got Priuses, Cadillacs. Now, speaking of Priuses, I was shocked just the other day, Jesse Zagorski, when he traded his Prius in for a Tesla. I'm like, and the payments are the same.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? It was pretty crazy.
And there's more to that story too. Jesse told me, and hopefully his wife isn't watching, she'll get mad at us, but sorry, Jesse. He said the main reason he got that Tesla is so that he can drive down the road and work. So.
Yeah.
Oh, look at this. Ken Kratz is watching. I love Ken. He's awesome. He's like, I had an H2, 180,000 hassle-free miles. Best car ever. Andy Kahn says H3. Check it out. We got Janet Smith's husband owns a Hummer. Holy cow.
Hey, we're not laughing at you. We're laughing with you.
Well, I'm laughing because I didn't realize there are that many people in real estate that own a Hummer, but apparently there's a ton. Like, again, it's a pretty cool car, right?
Yeah.
So.
And full disclosure, I do own a Mercedes, but it's paid for. So.
Okay, further disclosure. Last time I saw Doug in his Mercedes, there was a bag of chicken feed in the back seat. True story, not even joking.
Well, I'm here with you today. If you went and checked my back seat, there would still be a bag of chicken feed.
That's funny. And guys, that's a really interesting question. How do you use your car? Like, what's the purpose for your car? What's the reason for having a car? And it's funny. I can't remember who it was. Some really uber rich person was asked. Oh man, it's some famous person. And maybe you guys know. If you know the answer to this, type it in. But they were asked, why don't you own a Mercedes or a BMW or something like that? And this guy's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would I throw a bunch of when I go fishing, why would I throw all these dead fish in the back of a Mercedes? That makes no sense at all. That's why I've got a pickup truck.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's get back to wealth creation.
Okay, so getting back to the budget, because it's very important to make sure that all of your spending, all of your hard costs, plus your ancillary spending goes into that 70%. If it doesn't, you need to start paying down using that, using your investment fund to begin with to pay down that debt. And you do what's called the snowball effect. You start with the very smallest bill that you have, and you pay that off. And then you take that and you roll that same payment into another, your next smallest payment. Don't worry about interest rates at this point. Don't worry about everything. The reason we tell you to start with your smallest and work your way up is because the progress happens and can bring joy to you knowing that it happens, and you're more likely to stay on track than to tackle a big one and keep paying all these small ones.
Well, and the other thing too is the key here is you guys got to roll that payment. So if I'm already paying, $100 a month on my lowest card or whatever, I've got to keep paying that $100 a month even long after that card is paid off on the next one and on the next one. The key here is, guys, get debt free. Let me tell you, that's, you know what, Ashley just mentioned, it was the Millionaire Next Door that had the fish in the truck story. Thank you for that. You're right about that. But you guys, here's the key. The key is when you get debt free, you have freedom. You feel better. You're able to do other things. Coach Case Knockenauer is another great example of this. Here's a guy that literally could retire right now if he wanted to, right? But why is that? Because he's kept his living expenses low. He got debt free, and they're able to live on less than his wife makes as a teacher.
And everything that he makes, he's investing.
That's actually true too.
Yeah. So that's right. I mean, it's amazing how that works. And that's what I want to get back to. On this 30-70 budget, your goal is not to live on a 30-70 budget for the rest of your life. Your goal is to eventually convert that from a 30-70 budget to a 40-60 budget, a 50-50 budget, a 60-40 budget, and then a 70-30 budget. In other words, you're investing, you're still paying your 10% to charity, right? You've got your emergency fund funded now. That means that literally in a 70-30 budget, that 60% of your income is going towards investments. And you're living off of 30% of the income that you bring in.
And the other 10?
You've still got the 10% that goes to, and that's still your sacred funds, and that still goes to charitable contributions.
And we don't care what charitable contribution that is, right? Figure out what's right for you in terms of where you're going to give. Like Doug and I, we're both Mormon guys, LDS guys, right? So we give 10% tithing to the church. For you, it might be the sell a home, save a child. It might be, it doesn't matter. Whatever charity, whatever you feel is a worthy cause. The key here is you're giving back selflessly to an organization or to a cause that you believe in that is for the greater good and not for your own personal benefit. And let me tell you, the windows of heaven open up when you do this, you guys. It really does unlock blessings for you in your life that cannot be unlocked in any other way. But it only comes by truly selflessly giving. In fact, I'd be really interested, for those of you that are on right now, I would love for you to, if you're comfortable, just type in what charities are, you don't have to say how much. I'm just curious, what charities are you giving to? What worthy causes are you giving to? I'm really curious as to what we're doing in the industry. There's so many great causes out there. Type it in. I want to see what some of those are. Now, that being said, I have to run here in a second, so I'm going to let Brian and Doug wrap this up. They're going to need to end at 2 minutes to the hour so that we can start the coaches call right after this. But Doug, first of all, I want to thank you, and I'm really excited. Doug's going to be at Listing Agent Bootcamp in San Antonio, Texas, here in April. And so if you guys haven't already done so, I'm going to type in the link here, www.clubwealth.com/LABC. And that's for listing. Oh, I got to get this written in here properly. Listing Agent Bootcamp. And if you have not already purchased your tickets, I got to tell you, we have sold way more tickets. Hold on. We've sold way more tickets to the event this year already than we did last year. Hey, there you go. Allison Silverman mentions KW Cares, and that's Keller Williams. That's a great charity. They do a lot of good stuff. Pine Pantry, I've never heard of that one. I'll have to take a look. It's local. Okay, that's cool. I got it. But anyway, that being said, you guys, you need to get signed up for Listing Agent Bootcamp. We have fewer seats available at this one because the venue is smaller than we had in Colorado. And so it's going to sell out sooner than Listing Agent Bootcamp sold out in Colorado. And so far, all of our events have sold out. So please, please, please get your ticket ordered. And by the way, they're more affordable now. They'll be going up in price by $100 a ticket here pretty soon. So make sure you get signed up for that. Last thing I need to mention, just by way of crossing T's and dotting I's before these two keep going on the wealth creation piece, is don't forget to check out WiseHire. They're our sponsor. They're the ones that make this show possible. And yes, Coach Andy, I agree. Listing Agent Bootcamp is going to be amazing. We're throwing everything but the kitchen. In fact, we're throwing the kitchen sink at it this time. We've got, in fact, Brian was at a Tony Robbins event recently, and he came back and he says, Michael, this was the best speaker at Tony Robbins event. We need to get her for one of our events. She's speaking at Listing Agent Bootcamp. Oh, and by the way, we've got two other super high-powered speakers that are outside the industry, that are high-paid speakers that we've brought in as well. This, I'm telling you guys, this is going to be the event everybody's going to be talking about all year long. Don't end up with FOMO. Make sure you get your ticket. Make sure you get to the event, and make sure you get signed up for VIP. So that being said, I'm gonna pass it back to these guys. But you guys, seriously, I want you to. The last thing I want to share, my final thought, and then back to you guys, is you need to be building wealth. Forget about riches, you guys. We'll teach you how to make a ton of money. We're all about helping you make a ton of money. That said, you need to build wealth. And there's no excuse. I don't care where you're at in your life. I don't care how much or how little you make. I don't care how much or how little debt you have. None of that matters if you take small steps every single day to work toward building real wealth so that you can leave a greater legacy than just a few extra bucks to your kids. You want to be able to help people all over the world or wherever it is that you're focused. So that being said, awesome. Coach Doug, Coach Brian, take it away. Thank you guys so much. And then if you just want to bring this, that'd be awesome.
Okay. So I think, Brian, we've got about 5 minutes really to kind of wind this thing up.
Absolutely.
And I apologize that we didn't have more time to go into the budgeting process. However, what I want you to, because this is the problem. Everybody wants to start immediately with investing. And you just cannot do that. The problem is that if you do not live on a monthly budget, especially with the real estate income, how it goes up and down and up and down, that's why we set up a budget. Because if you've got accounts set aside for all of these various things that you need to spend your money on, if you make $10,000 one month and $4,000 the next month you make nothing, and then the next month you make $30,000. If you set it up over a year-long budget based upon last year's results, if you're killing it this year, all of that excess can be put into your investment account. And then when we start talking about investments, and everybody wants, that's what everybody wants to jump to when they call me. They're like, okay, Doug, where do I start investing? Well, first of all, let's see if you can afford to invest. Most people don't even know whether or not they can afford to invest because they have no clue as to where they're at because they're not following a budget. They're allowing their income to dictate to them what they can do from month to month.
Absolutely.
You don't want to have to do that.
No, and here's a further point. I have conversations with agents. I have 2 interview questions that I use very specifically that I think are important to this concept. The first question is, what's the minimum amount of money that you need to make? And honestly, majority of the people I talk to will say something like $30,000, $40,000. And then I'll ask the next question, well, how much do you want to make? Well, I want to make $100,000. Okay, great. Now let me ask you this. What do you do with the other $50,000 or $60,000? And the problem is most people don't know the answer to that. And my response to them is that's why you're not going to get it. Yeah. So you do what Doug is suggesting, which is sitting down and, okay, I'll create my budget for today. And then I want to invest X number of dollars a month. There's a why right there. Just because now I know that I want to invest $4,000 a month, which means that I need to make about $6,000 more than I'm making, because you got to, just because you make that money doesn't mean you don't have to pay taxes on it. So, those are a great way. All those people out there who are going, I don't have a why, I don't have a reason, come up with your budget like Doug is talking about, and then let's talk about the fun things that we can do. And I'm not talking about buying boats and cars and houses. I'm talking about setting aside so that you can be sitting across from Doug and saying, hey, I don't have to work either. So anyway, I cut you off there. Keep going, Doug.
Well, no, I mean, that's the beautiful thing. The problem is that we live in an impatient society. We are impatient. We want to be where our parents were, immediately. I see that all the time. Young kids that I'm talking to, I'm working with a young man now, and his dad owns a very successful business, and he doesn't know what he wants to do with his life. And I say, what do you want to do? And he says, well, I want to do what my dad does. Okay, well, you know what? I helped put your dad in business. I know what it takes. I know what it took him. I can't tell you the number of hours that we counseled together when he thought the world was coming apart, when he couldn't afford to do things. The problem is that we want instant gratification, and there's no such thing as instant gratification if you want to create true wealth. It's methodical, it's consistent, and it's steady. You've got to realize that over time is how you create wealth in your life. I tell people all the time, every time I buy a rental property, that people just, I just can't do that. I don't trust somebody else in it, or whatnot. I said, look, every time I buy a rental property, it's like buying a 401k. I contribute, and I tell them, if I came to you and said, look, give me 10 grand and I will contribute X number of dollars back to you for the rest of your life, how many of you would do it? Everybody's hands goes up. That's what a rental property is. You put the initial down to buy it, and then you let somebody else pay for it. And when it's paid off, they'll continue to pay for that property until the day you die. Somebody else is paying off that 401k for you. And not only are they paying it off, but you're going to get payments in perpetuity. And in the real estate business like we're in, there's tax advantages that nobody else can get.
Absolutely.
So if that isn't one of your number one investment goals because you have fear of taking care of it, let me tell you something. I don't manage any of my residential properties. I have a residential property management company that takes care of everything. My instructions to them are, I want the rents increased once a year. And if I ever get a homeowner that calls me, you're fired.
That's a good baseline for it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Doug, we got less than a minute left. I'll finish my final thoughts and then I'll let you close up. Actually, I'll let you go first and then I'll close this out. So,
well, people always say, when's the best time to start? Just like you said in the beginning, Brian, yesterday.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, there's people on this call who have maybe even more investments than Doug, more investments than me, and those people, congratulations. There's also people on this call who have never even thought about investing. Let me say this. If you have these questions, if you have these concerns, reach out to Club Wealth, reach out to Michael, and we'll put you together with Doug. I'm not sure the exact process. That's not my department, but I promise you we'll get you something that you need. Take those opportunities. It's a great opportunity to talk to someone who's been down here, up here, down here, and now is up here again. Be a wise person, learn from Doug's mistakes, and let him teach you. It's a valuable resource. With that in mind, I will finish Club Wealth. Let everyone know there's a beast inside you waiting to get out, and just go ahead and release that beast today. Thanks everybody for watching. Everybody have an awesome day, and we'll see you next week.